This is the Tuesday, November 15th Development Review Board of the City of Burlington meeting. I'm going to call it to order. We have a quorum. And we proceed through items as they are listed on our agenda. The only agenda item change that I'm aware of is that item 2 of our public hearing, ZAP 22-489 Chestnut Terrace. That is an appeal. The appellants have withdrawn their appeal, and so that is removed from our agenda at this point. So the next item is the communications. Scott has posted the communications online relevant to the applications. I'm not aware of any additional ones. Scott, have any others come in that we should know about?
I think we're up to date. Are we all up to date for BHS, Mary? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, there's a fair amount of material for 52 Institute Road that has been posted, so presuming we'd all read those. The next item is minutes. This is for the board. If anybody has any things they like to add to the minutes, I've signed our last set, and I suppose we can talk about that in our deliberative. And so with that, the first item on our agenda is listed on our consent agenda, ZP 22-466, 187 South Champlain Street. The City of Burlington, Department of Public Works, Parks and Recreation is seeking renovations to a city pocket park and site improvements. I see the applicant's been called up. And I'm not sure I have to swear them in for a consent agenda item. So let me do this. What?
I said you do. It's just
you do?
You don't have to.
All right. Well, Mr. Madalinsky.
I'm recused from this matter.
I was going to ask you whether you were going to or not, Jeff. Mr. Madalinsky, can you raise your right hand?
Yes, I can. I don't know if you can see it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're not on. We don't put them on video yet. So, please raise your right hand and state that any testimony you give in this matter will be true and correct under the pains and penalties of perjury.
Any testimony I give on this matter,
you can just say I do.
I do. That works.
There you go. So this has been put on our consent agenda, which means the staff has reviewed it and recommend that we approve it without a hearing. Have you seen the staff comments and recommendation on this item?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any issues or concerns about them?
No, I do not.
Okay. Is there anybody in the public here to speak on this agenda item?
If so, raise your hand. Looks like not, AJ, just Max.
All right. Well, do any board members have any questions for the applicant? All right. Well, then I'll make a motion just to move it along on application ZP 22-466. I move that we approve the application and adapt staff's findings and recommendations.
Second.
All those in favor? All right, that everybody? All right. Enjoy the pocket park.
Thank you all so much.
Okay, the next agenda item the next item is a public hearing. ZP 22-528, 447 Main Street. That's Dressler and Seymour. Demolition of existing carriage house to construct new accessory structure. And I see the applicant.
Ramsey Gord is one of the applicants.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, Brad.
Hi, Brad. And Ramsey Gord. Okay. Can I get all of you to raise your right hand, please? do you swear that the testimony you give in regards to this matter will be true and correct under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
I
Everybody
do.
else? Okay.
Has Marcus Gonzalez been unmuted?
Yeah.
I'm here.
Okay.
So we have the staff comments and we have the recommendations, but why don't you tell us what you're looking to do? And if you want Scott to call up any plans, we generally don't enable screen sharing, but if there's anything you need to call up, I think he can arrange that, or Mary can. I'm not sure who's driving this bus right now.
I'm driving it. Mary's the project manager though. I'll do a share screen.
So why don't you walk us through your project?
So what we're looking to do is replace this existing structure in kind with a new structure. The existing structure has no foundation and is really just staying up by habit. We've been through design advisory, and they asked us to provide better documentation of the existing details, which we have done, and then continued to indicate how we are essentially simulating those details in our proposal. The biggest change to the design is the addition of a dormer from the existing, change from the sliding doors to the carriage house style garage doors, and the new dormer there that you see, the shed dormer on the upper right, and skylight. So the size and massing of the building remains the same as the existing, but essentially we are saving the form because it is about to just decay and fall into the ground by building a new structure in its place.
You know, I personally like that we're not dealing with, when I first saw this come up, this board has dealt extensively with demolition by neglect on historic carriage barns. So I'm happy to see that we're not dealing with that here, and that you seem to be making a pretty good effort to replicate the historic elements that made this carriage barn historic.
That's our intent.
Yeah, and I know this board has struggled with how to deal with those demolition by neglect agenda items. Does anybody on the board, I mean, is that generally it? Is there anything else you'd like to add to it?
No, I think most of the changes are really to meet the requirements of the energy code and the building code, to bring the structure, essentially the same use that it has, or similar use that it has, to within current energy efficiency and code requirements. We will be, like, the new siding around the back side of it will be non-combustible siding. So when we consider how close it is to the property line, we're eliminating the fire hazard there. We're installing egress windows. We're providing a code compliant stair. So there are a number of issues that we're addressing in the new design, but really trying to keep the integrity of the fabric of the community.
Scott, I'll note FYI that you're getting a 404 error on your staff report for this agenda item right now.
Oh, no.
Really?
I
Yeah.
was also getting that, and I refreshed the page and then was able to actually get it. So
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
it
Yeah, I'm
seems to
getting
be-
that. So anyway, I mean, I've read it, but does any board members have any questions for the applicants on this one?
AJ, just one. I think the staff report notes there's not an application for an accessory apartment or accessory use for the structure right now. Is that consistent with your intended use, or are you expecting to apply for that, just so we understand?
It's a continuation of existing conditions. It is currently an accessory structure, accessory dwelling.
Well, let's be clear.
I get a little confused by the nomenclature of these things. so-
Well, what, let me ask my question thusly. What use is it today?
It is a one-bedroom apartment over a storage space.
Okay.
Hmm.
And how is that one bedroom apartment used?
It's used as, it's under the new ownership, it's used as a guest facility. It's not used as a rental property.
Okay. And I'll ask this of staff, is there a permit for that?
We repeatedly asked the applicant if the intention was to have a discrete unit, and the answer was no. There is finished living space on the second floor, and it's been acknowledged by the assessor's office to have been there for some decades. It's not clear that when the permit was issued for an antique shop, if it included living space, but it appears to have been finished space since the antique shop was there.
Does the application, like the application that was filed, I can't seem to pull it up, seek only the construction, or does it state specifically the continuation of the use?
The continuation of expanded living area associated with a single-family home.
But this is an independent living area?
It is not a complete unit. There is no kitchen.
Correct.
The wording on staff documents is that the upstairs is acknowledged by the assessor's property database as existing finished living space associated with the single family residence. The applicant does not seek a discrete second unit.
Okay. So it would just be like extra living room space, basically. There's no
It's like a detached guest room.
Okay. I think that's something we're gonna have to figure out how to define in our approval, because at least I'm concerned, right, of creep in the future. So, okay. I mean, I think it's a nice project. Does anybody else on the board have any questions for the applicant? No. Right, anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Nope.
You're muted, Scott.
I don't see any hands raised, AJ.
Yeah, I didn't see any other. Okay, well, and if there's nothing else, then I suggest we close the public hearing. And we will deliberate on this maybe tonight. Depends on how long the other agenda items go, I suppose. And we'll get a decision out shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, the next agenda item, which I just lost my agenda, is certificate of appropriateness, because 89 Chestnut Terrace is out. Certificate of appropriateness, ZP 22-546, 52 Institute Road, City School Department, demolish and remediate existing high school and construct new 250,000 square foot high school / technical center.
AJ, I'm recused from this matter also.
Okay, and I also want to state before I don't know who's here to speak on this from the public, but I know this was a recent ballot agenda item in the city of Burlington. Whatever it may or may not cost is not something that we have any jurisdiction or authority over. So to the extent anybody would like to talk about what the proposed costs were, that's not something we can really take testimony on without being able to see the scope of the audience. I don't know whether that's something people had intended to speak about or not. Also, our review is limited by statute. That is in the staff notes, and we're only able to review certain elements of this by state statute. So I just wanted to start with that because this is a large project in the city and I don't know who's here to chat about it, but otherwise, do we have the applicant with us?
You do, Joe White.
Hi,
with
hi, Joe.
Whiteburg. How you doing, AJ?
Good.
So we, if I could just maybe just do a broad introduction, because we do have a large contingent here of our project team and development team.
Let me swear everybody in first, Joe.
Okay,
So if anyone intends to speak on this application, could you raise your right hand, please? And so do you swear that any testimony you will give on this application is true and correct under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Okay, Joe, you're welcome to introduce us to your team and start wherever you'd like to start with this.
okay, sure, thank you. So again, I'm Joe White with Whitenberg Real Estate Advisors. We are the overall project manager working with the district, and we do have several members from our design team and project team. Rather than including everyone by name, I'll just briefly say that we've got, well, other than Lyle Smith, who's Director of Property Services with the school district, he's on the line, but we have several architects, our civil engineer, our stormwater engineer, landscape architect, traffic transportation consultant, and also our environmental consultant and construction advisor on the line tonight. So I think we're pretty well covered in case you have any technical questions that you want to ask. But what we would like to do is that we have a kind of a very brief kind of high level project overview presentation that we want to just quickly walk you through. We'll have Brian Leet with French Freeman Architects walk you through that and present the project. And then after Brian, we'd like our landscape architect, Mike Willard with VHB, just to say a few words and specifically address one of the conditions that was included in the Conservation Board's recommendation last night, that we include in our landscape plan only native species. So he would like to just say a few words about that. And then we'll finish with our traffic transportation consultant, Jen Conley with VHB, who will just say a few words regarding our the TDM plan that we submitted and our proposal to not require the district to purchase car share memberships. But she'll kind of walk through that real quickly, include some reasons why we don't think that would be necessarily beneficial to our TDM plan. So with that, I'll have Brian kind of lead us through the project.
Sorry about that. Okay, now you can hear me. All right. So we're looking at the overall site plan rendered for the project. The new Burlington High School and Technical Center completely replaces the academic buildings, which will all be removed from the existing high school. The existing building A is roughly in the area of the technical center here. And if you're familiar with the current site, the existing parking lot is roughly in this area marked high school. The project introduces a new access road to the south side of the building off of Institute Road, and creates an entrance facing Institute Road for visitors during school hours, and entry to the first level of a multi-story commons at the center of the building that connects through the building. Continuing down that access road, we have the entrance to the technical center program with its own distinct entry at a lower level that only exists kind of in this southwest portion of the building. The existing access road up the west side of the site is slightly realigned and gives access to a screened loading and service area. This will be function both for loading. It's also going to have the fleet vehicles associated with the school, and those are screened with coniferous plantings around the south and north edges. And then we have the loading dock, I'm sorry, the double tray of parking up in the area where the buildings C through F for the current high school are located, which also provide access to the north side entrance, which is on level 2 of the multi-story commons in the building. The only existing building on site to remain is the structure that currently houses the wood chip heat plant, but the new building will be completely electric mechanical system for with a geothermal water source supply. So that building will be repurposed for storage and other district functions. We're showing the our understanding of the city's intention to introduce bike lanes down both sides of Institute Road. Currently, the south side of Institute Road has a series of parking spaces. So we are anticipating that those parking spaces will no longer be available. We're also showing the relocation of the bus stop along North Avenue from the south side of the intersection to the north side. There's currently a bus loop here, which made that a poor location for a bus stop, but by relocating the bus stop in this new design, it avoids one traffic crossing for all the people arriving to the site or departing the site from onto a southbound bus. The two drop-off areas are designed for either car or bus travel. And Jen can talk a little bit more about the transportation plan. Nothing to the south of Institute Road is planned for change, so all of the work is occurring on the north side of the site. We do have bike parking locations, racks and storage at each of the 3 entrances, and also corresponding to the ability to come down from the New North End residential neighborhoods north to the north side of the building, up North Avenue to the south side entrance, and up from the bike path to the west side of the building. I'll briefly walk you through the floor plans. I know it's not really within your jurisdiction to do kind of design review on them, given the district's status, but it's helpful to understand. The building exists, it's a 4-story building essentially, but it runs down the hill. So the west side of the building is 4 stories that goes from lower level to 3, and the east side goes from 1st to 4th. So we're seeing that one little portion at the west end with the technical center entrance, and then corridor to technical center spaces. This entrance here off of the 1st floor is a entrance to the 1st level of the commons. It also functions as a visitor entry during school hours. So people arriving to the school outside of student arrival would have to come to this door, be buzzed into the vestibule, enter the principal's office, get tagged in, checked, and either get their escort or directions before proceeding into the school. So that becomes the single point of access during school hours. Other elements on this floor are the lower seating bowl for the auditorium and lockers, and again, more BTC and special education classrooms. The 2nd level has a connected upper portion for the commons space overlooking the spaces below. To the east wing, you have the 1st level of the main academic program. Between the commons and that, you have the auditorium here entering from the back of the lower seating bowl, up the risers and out to the back. And then on the west side of the commons, you have the athletics, the gymnasium program with both a 2-court gym with hardwood for varsity basketball, and also with a operable partition a synthetic floor gym for more community space, which is also provided with its own separate entrance so that that portion of the building can be isolated, made secure, and used for community functions. In this wing, we also have some design technology and food programs associated with the health and wellness aspects of the high school. On the third level, we have the library taking up the center portion of the building with a glass wall separating it from the light well that brings skylight down into the center of the building. We have the balcony to the auditorium and the additional level of classrooms and art rooms. And on the top floor, one more level of classrooms. The roof is planned for photovoltaics across all of the areas that kind of could function for that element. In addition, we are looking at adding green roofs in areas that are not as suitable to putting photovoltaics due to smaller areas or constraints on the space. Very briefly, the elevations of the building. It is a large building, as is obvious from the square footage. It's about 560 feet long. Faces east towards North Avenue. So we have a kind of a feature element to face North Avenue. And then here's the west elevation facing back into the property. And this is the basic view from near the intersection with Institute Road and North Avenue. Here you can see the drop off. If you're familiar with the site, there's a pretty significant grade change from the intersection at North Avenue down to the west end of the property. So in order to make the drop off work, the drop off grade is relatively level and then comes back down steeply to re-meet that road at the bottom of the hill. Again, there's the element kind of facing North Avenue. And from the north side entrance, from the parking levels, we have this view. A couple interior shots I think might be coming up. Or is that what I've got? Yep, that's it. So I think with that, I'm going to scroll back up to the landscape plan and turn the conversation over to Mike Ward to talk really quickly about the planting plans. And actually, I'm not sure, is Mike on this call? I had thought I'd seen him, but.
Mike Burke, Brian.
No, Mike Willard was going to speak to.
Mike Willard, sorry, I got them mixed up. Yeah, he is. Let me find him.
And I'm not sure.
He's,
Has his
yeah.
hand up.
Yeah, there we go.
And Jen Connolly might not have been let into the meeting as well.
Okay, so Mike and Jen can both talk now.
Okay, great, thank you. So the just briefly talking about sort of the landscape design for the site. So really, in large part, mostly using sort of native and adaptive plant material for the tree species and shrubs around the property that sort of line the main entry drive coming in and sort of the pedestrian walkways. So those sort of really define sort of the site design and elements and sort of lead people to the front entry to the building. And particularly, you know, coming from the different walkways and approaches from the parking lot, visitor drop off and such. So we've got a sort of a mix of evergreens and deciduous trees, and also some evergreen and deciduous shrubs that are sort of located around the property. We're using ornamental grasses in areas that are immediately adjacent to the building within sort of manicured landscape beds that are sort of in between the building and the hardscape elements. And I think the Conservation Board had a question about using sort of ornamentals like that on the site. And so these are sort of typically used, and you see them around the city of Burlington and other places So that's really to create sort of seasonal interest and also using plant material that can deal with sort of drought conditions, salt tolerance, and sort of handle the urban environment, knowing that this is going to be a bunch of teenagers running around the site. So, and balancing what the school district has for capacity for sort of landscape maintenance, weeding, that sort of stuff. So really sort of really designing a landscape palette that is sort of durable to the urban environment and that can handle the conditions that it will be sort of enduring. And then so I think the Conservation Board, unfortunately, I wasn't in attendance at the meeting last night, but I believe there's a comment about just invasives or non-native species migrating, but just want to be clear that any of the ornamental grasses that are specified are sort of clump forming and they don't spread. So they stay in that sort of manicured landscape bed, sort of perennial areas in between the building and the hardscape. So you've got parking lots and asphalt and a lot of pavement in between them and any sort of naturalized areas around the property. So they're very sort of specific and targeted right at the building entries as you come in, again, to create that sort of seasonal and visual interest as a guest arrival and user of the property.
All right, and then I guess
Who
Jen,
else
did
got
you want to
next?
speak to the TDM?
Can I ask you a question on the landscaping? Just as long as we're on that. Michael, I just want to get clear, the green spaces like between the walks on the east side of the building, that's all available for students to hang out in that space, is that correct?
That's right. So any of that sort of like open lawn areas, that's completely available for anyone to sort of migrate as long as the grades work. You know, you've got some the building floor to floor elevations change around as you could move through, but all that big open lawn area was sort of seen as available for the students for passive recreation and using at their leisure.
Great, thank you.
In regards to the TDM plan, we were very thoughtful about what was proposed. The population here is primarily, as you all know, high school students who are not going to be able to use a car share. And so given that students, as well as there's a commitment for all staff at the high school to receive fully subsidized transit passes, that works to reduce the reliance on automobile trips for both of those populations in a way that is much greater than what is required by the ordinance and much greater than what would typically be offered if someone were to join CATMA, for example, join their pay as they go program. In this way, anyone in the population is able to get a transit pass and use that form of transportation. In addition, as far as car share, in addition to membership, there's also the challenge of locating cars, that if there is not a demand population nearby, that the person placing the car or asking the car share to be placed at that site ends up requiring, having to do a minimum subsidy to be able to keep a car at that location. So those factors combined to a recommendation to just stay with the focus of TDM on the transit. And if someone does have a need for a car share, there is a car share location 0.6 miles away, but where in a close walking distance there isn't a large population who would want to use the car share, especially given the high transit subsidy piece, we did not recommend the participation in the car share in the TDM plan as presented.
Okay. It's interesting. You're not really changing to, you're going from high school to high school. So I'm glad to see the thought effort you put into that. But, I was thinking about this myself and looking at the application. It's like, well, sort of the same number of kids to the same number of kids. Ultimately, we're not adding any new use to the site.
Sure.
Traffic is traffic. So I do, one of the conditions, one of the things in the staff report is brownfield remediation. And then I have a question for staff. How do we, this is sort of for staff. Obviously, I'm well aware of the brownfield issues on the site. I think we all are. This is a question for staff. How does that compliance with 5.4.9 get tracked from a zoning perspective?
Well, the steps for remediation are largely dictated by the state.
Right. But do we not issue the construction permit until that gets finalized?
The timeline will be defined by those methods that are going to be employed for the cleanup of the site.
Okay. Do we need to, and I'm assuming they can't start reconstruction until those are completed. And so where I'm going is, our permits have a timeline in them. Do we need to address, I mean, that could take a while, or it could take some period of time. Do we have the authority to specifically change our timelines because there's some limited extensions we can provide? And I'm just, what's listed under brownfield remediation could take a while.
Sure.
And I want to make sure that we're not in a permit expiration, in the place of a
Sure.
permit expiration, while that's all getting worked out.
I think I can assist with that. Of course, any federal or state permitting would toll the life on this permit issuance. But the applicants have also added a request for an additional year. They've asked for 4 years to build in the timeline for that very necessary remediation.
Okay. Okay. So I want to ask another question of staff, which is, there's closing down, one of the requirements is closing down a bunch of old permits. If the building is being demolished, how do you go about closing down a permit? Do you have to close it down before you demolish it?
Well, all of those open permits are going to have certificates of occupancy or have been superseded before a CO can be issued for this project.
Okay.
I would imagine that a great number of those will be superseded with the demolition of the building. Of the open permits.
Okay. All right. Does the applicant have more to present?
No, I think we presented what we wanted to, just to kind of introduce you to the project and some of the issues, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, I had a couple of quick points, if I may.
Yeah, I have a couple more questions.
So the landscaping, Conservation Board recommended revising the landscape plan to incorporate all native species. Applicant has some concerns with that. I had a quick conversation with the city arborist and city land steward this afternoon. We'd recommend, in the spirit of the Conservation Board's recommendation, to include a condition to the effect of working out the final details for the planting plan with an emphasis on native species, but allowing for non-natives where there's justification for that, such as salt tolerance, right? I mean, that's a pretty common reason to go with something that is non-native. But basically defer to final details on that, pending working that out with the Parks Department or the city arborist, however you want to phrase that. The other point I'd make is the car share requirement under the TDM is just that, it's a requirement. It can't be waived. If it's a terrible policy, then tell the policymakers. There's a follow-up amendment to Article 8 that's before the city council still. It's been there for a few months. But the car share membership requirement is just that, it's a requirement. There's wording that says, or with an equivalent or better service. And a conceivable alternative is, let's say the school district decided to have its own vehicle available for staff use. And that would be an example of equivalent or better. But shy of that, the car share membership is needed.
Scott, I have a question about that. Is that within our scope of review under 24 VSA 4413?
I think it is, because it refers to parking, and the TDM is all about the parking standards and how to manage them.
Okay.
That was it. Those are my 2 points.
And I guess, Scott, and the bus passes can't take the place of the car share requirement?
No, it's two pieces. The one piece is the bus passes, which they're providing, and the other piece is the car share memberships. What actually doesn't apply here is the requirement to have on-site car share spaces. I just checked that a moment ago, and that's tied to residential development.
So who do they offer the car share memberships to?
To staff. Yeah, all employees, all tenants, obviously, for residential or employees.
That's an interesting point, Scott. So I see, yeah, they have to, it shall be offered, the car share membership, but there's no space requirement.
That's right. There's a requirement to actually provide an on-site space for car share for residential development. But this is not residential, so they just need to provide the memberships.
I mentioned this in the staff report too, but in lieu of those two standards, the applicant can maintain an ongoing and active membership in a transportation management association that offers equivalent TDM strategies. So it's an either or.
Right, but the catch there is there's no, CAPMA is the only transportation management association, and they don't provide equivalent or better services. Trust me, there's been plenty of debate with the follow-up amendment to Article 8 about that.
Sticking with parking for a minute, I'm curious about the layout right in front of the building, and I was unsure of the exact number of spaces and the orientation. I also bring this up because there was a video posted to the Burlington Technical Center website, and it seemed to have a lot of parallel parking in front of the school, and I was wondering about that.
There's no parallel parking along that drop-off curb. That is the morning setting where parents are dropping off their students and moving on. And then there's very short-term pullover for during the day use for visitors.
And is there someone there in the morning helping to direct traffic, either in front of the school or at the roads?
We feel the design will allow for that if the school district deems it necessary, but it's pretty much self-serve with enough curb line to accommodate that amount of traffic. safely. The crosswalks are all designated. So it's certainly a possibility.
There was a note in the staff report about a maintenance road that may need to be constructed.
Yeah, that's in the stormwater. I was not at stormwater yet, but go on, Leo. That's a question.
I was wondering, yeah, just there was also a question about stormwater in the last preliminary review of this. Perhaps you could talk about both the stormwater system and the maintenance road.
So Dave
Yeah.
Marshall here from Civil Engineering Associates. I'll touch base
Evening,
quickly.
Dave.
I'm sorry.
Evening, Dave.
Yes, thank you. In this particular case, we did respond to the staff comment regarding access to the proposed stormwater management facility. So we have updated the application to reflect that particular feature. So to enable easier access to the various components of the stormwater management facility. So in this particular case, just for orientation on the plan before you, looking at actually the southern end of this particular site plan, you'll see the track and the football field. Actually, just to the left or west of that is the existing stormwater management facility. It's essentially a large pond that takes the stormwater runoff from not only the school, but also Institute Road, and provides some level of settling as an open pond, and then ultimately discharges into a ravine that runs down to the lake. In this particular case, Watershed Consulting Associates has provided a design to provide improved water quality features. We went over this in a lot of detail with the Conservation Board last night, and we're happy to basically touch base on that to give you an update in regards to that particular critical feature in regards to how we're actually not only consolidating this particular site from the footprints that are building footprints that occupies previously, but more specifically in regards to the environmental impacts of the prior site and how we're improving upon that with this particular proposal. We may be a good time to have Andres Terizo touch base on that if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Hey, good evening.
Hi, Andres.
How you doing, AJ? So I'd be happy just to give just a quick overview of the stormwater system. So we looked at what's called a regenerative stormwater conveyance, and it's a newer type of treatment technology that we've done successfully here in Vermont, but it's originally was thought up in the Chesapeake, and it's really specific towards restoring degraded ephemeral channels like this. And it really was perfect for this site because in the current condition, the school, all the drainage from the school ends up at a very large outfall to the west of the track. And that outfall, if you were to go down and look at it, is failing. It's a large concrete structure. It's broken. It's failing. There's a lot of erosion downstream, and it's carved quite a bit of a large channel that eventually makes its way down to the lake. And so what we're proposing to do is utilize the upper part of the channel, really mostly just adjacent to the track, to the west of the track, and basically restore that channel, but at the same time provide water quality enhancement through sand filtration, and also restoring with native wetland seeding, stabilizing the banks, which are in some places eroded, and also just providing a lot of flow detention through basically restoring an outlet control at the lower end of the structure. Is a large kind of a ponded area where there's a lot of debris that's accumulated over the years, a lot of brush and other trash and debris. And we're going to formalize an outlet control there. So essentially there'll be better flow control from the system. So it's kind of what you would envision to be a step pool. So it kind of flows from one pool to the next, and it flows, it follows kind of the natural grade down, and there's sand beds, at each step. There's a sand bed, and then the sand bed has some natural, woody vegetation is going to be left in there for some additional kind of check dam structures. And so that's kind of the general summary of the stormwater system. And I'm happy to kind of go into more detail in terms of the permitting or anything you would like to know specifically.
Scott, we have this plan under stormwater access that's posted online.
Brian, can you fish that up?
Yep, give me one moment here. I think I have.
Okay.
C 2.2 is the plan.
Brian, do you have the most recent one that shows the access road, the maintenance road? Or path?
Yes, actually C. I have the most recent C 2.0. Is that the?
It's C 2.2. If you want to see the screen, I can share.
Yeah, I'll have to do that. I don't appear to have that one.
Here we go. Is this the one you were referencing, Joe? With the access
yes.
road? Yeah, and the
Yes.
new outfall.
Right, so I can just describe what you're looking at here on the, you can just see basically the edge of the track to the, right where the cursor is there, there's the track. So we're looking just to the west or left of the track. And, so the stormwater comes into a large 4-bay system, and that's currently where the outfall that I was describing is located, where all the pipes come together currently for all the drainage from the school. And there's a large concrete structure there. So there's going to be a 4-bay structure. And then from the 4-bay, the water goes to the south and it goes through these series of bays. You can see the bays, and those bays are separated by these large gabion check dams. And so that's kind of what controls the grades, and the water kind of spills from one to the next to the next. And then finally, right where the cursor is now, is kind of the larger pool at the end. And so that's going to be controlled by a pipe which goes under the kind of the land bridge, which is really right in the park. There's an outlet structure there that would be, controlling the water kind of in that final bay, and that would all be also cleaned up and restored, because currently right now, as I was mentioning, there's a ton of debris and brush and trash and stuff that's accumulated in that hole right there.
Okay, well, I mean, it's a pretty robust stormwater system. The staff notes sort of, I think, address maintenance. Andres, how do you maintain that system?
So the 4-bay would be the place where all the solids would accumulate. And so that would be, the main maintenance point of the system would be cleaning, making sure that the 4-bay is kept clean, as sediment and other debris and stuff would accumulate. And then as any debris would accumulate on the sand beds themselves, I mean, they would be scraped, material would accumulate on the surface, it would be removed. Periodically sand may need to be reintroduced, but that wouldn't be like an every year kind of a thing. That would just be if it started to, all the vegetation would start to take hold and fine material would accumulate on there. It could be scraped off and then sand could be reintroduced. So, I mean, those would be the main maintenance items. I guess at the end where the outlet structure would be also, as material would accumulate around that, it would have to be removed and kept clean. So there's nothing really out of the ordinary in terms of the maintenance. Compared to other similar types of stormwater systems.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else on the board have questions for the applicant?
I have one, AJ.
Yeah.
There's a request for a waiver on the number of bike parking spaces to be provided. With the ordinance asking 480 and 136 are being proposed. Does the applicant have any sense of how many spaces are used right now, given that this, not right now, but formerly at the high school, how many they needed?
Yeah, we do. Maybe Jen could speak to that. VHB did do a bike parking demand study at the existing high school. which indicated, kind of low usage. And if we went with that standard and applied it to our estimated student capacity at this new school, I think we would only need like 48 bike parking spaces, but we're proposing 136, I believe it is. But Jen, do you want to talk a little bit about the study you did?
I don't have too much more to add to that. We did collect data on a number of days at the existing facility and noted not just bikes in the bike designated bike parking, but any bikes really anywhere around the facility locked to anything, just assuming that it might be, correlate to student demand. And as was already presented, found that demand is significantly below. It was, about a quarter of what we're currently proposing for bike accommodation on the proposed site.
The results of that bicycle parking demand study is within the table in the staff report. There is a comparison there of what the ordinance requires, what lead recommendations are, what the bicycle parking demand study produced, and what the applicant is offering.
Thanks. I see the table.
In a very nice little package.
Is there space next to the current parking facilities to build more or to put in more if that need should arise?
That's something you could address, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just I wasn't sure if you or Jen were going to jump in, but there's plenty of space there. Part of what we were thinking is we don't want to just add concrete and bike hoops if they're not going to get used, but those spaces could be expanded.
We also felt that the lead standard was the appropriate level of parking in this situation, having the 3 major entrances and going for lead certification. So that's what we're going for.
Okay. Anybody else on the board?
Sorry, maybe just one more. I was hoping you could speak a little bit about the multi-use, the fact that other people from the community might be coming in. There might be events in the evening and security and potential parking issues. I don't know if you've have a specific security plan or something like that.
I can jump in, Brian, if you want. Essentially, high school is a community building and should be open and used by the community. And so we will have a security plan. There are already security policies in place by the school district. But to reinforce that through the architecture, there'll be an audio-visual system and a camera system on all of the entry points and within the school. There'll also be zones within the school that can be secured and locked so that partial access to certain pieces of the school can be quadrant off. We've located all the entries with handicap accessibility. There are 3 elevators within the building, carefully placed along the length of the school for full access to all levels and all spaces. And we also have monitoring points that can be occupied either during hours or off hours.
I would also add, and I think there is a chart in the report that talks about the peak capacity during sports events and other events, and there was a discussion and decision at the district level to try to support the goals of not over providing parking, and a recognition that in some cases that might require the district to do other arrangements with neighbors and shuttles and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and certainly we're
in those
trying to
cases.
overall limit the expanse of, impervious surface parking as much as we can in general. Okay. Is there anyone else is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak on this application? Raise your hand.
Sharon Busher.
Sharon.
I saw the hand go up.
Okay. Sharon, did I swear you in?
No, you did not.
Okay. Can you raise your right hand?
I will.
Do you swear to tell the truth and that the testimony you will give in this matter is true and correct under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
All right. Floor is yours.
Thank you. I think Leo just touched on some of what I wanted to just acknowledge. It had to do with when this process began, and it was before the Planning Commission for zoning. And at that time, the high school was in 2 zones, which would have allowed for greater numbers of cars or greater number of surface parking. And I'm not like, I don't want to cover the world with concrete and parking lots, but I do know, I mean, I didn't grow up in this community, but my children did, and they went to BHS. And even after they graduated, I've gone to track events that have been regional. And I was concerned. There was a reduction as a result of that discussion. Rather than 2 zones, it was 1 zone. And for TDM reasons, what originally was thought for a number of surface parking spaces was reduced. And I kept being concerned about those events. And I know that those don't happen all that frequently, but I'm not sure it's realistic to think people that are coming from other parts of the state are going to use some neighbor's driveway, or how you're going to shuttle people. I mean, I live on East Avenue, and we have the lake monsters behind my house, and there's parking from Gutterson to here to East Avenue. It's very slick. It works really well. But I don't know. I mean, that's really a close distance, and people could, if they wanted to leave early, they could walk back to their car. They wouldn't be dependent on a shuttle bus. So I'm concerned a little bit about how that all played out. What I was told during the process was that the schools could always ask for a waiver, not to reduce the number of spaces, but to ask for more spaces. And I've never heard that stated. I think that they're environmentally aware and very conscientious, and I applaud them for that. But I do think we want to get it right. And I know there are pavers that can be used that can allow runoff water to go through those pavers. And so you're not creating that solid surface. And I just wondered if the school now felt that their plan was reasonable, and I would like to know if they are going to not make that request for a waiver. And if they don't do it at this point, then I don't know. I imagine they could come back and ask one, but I'm not really sure about that. And so I just wanted to get that on the record, that I do have some concerns about the number of spaces, not on a daily basis. Most of the time, they know their business far better than I, but it has to do with those events that occur. And I think BHS has been a magnet for a lot of different things to occur there, and community events. And I want to be able to accommodate that reasonably, and not short us in that process. I would like to think, like so many other people, we seem to be moving forward with reducing parking, but we don't really have a really good, as we all know, public transportation system. We just don't have it. And so it seems like we are and we're trying to force it, but that's not happening very effectively. So I'm concerned about this and needed to raise that with the DRB at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Appreciate that. I think, you raised an interesting point about the overall traffic impact from, high school events. Scott, do you have your hand up?
I do, AJ.
Okay, by all means.
Just real quick, Conservation Board acted last night, and I see Mary posted the minutes in the packet. But I just thought I'd mention their recommendation. I already mentioned the landscaping, but the other two conditions go hand in hand as to stormwater, and that is consider educational opportunities focused on the stormwater system and funding through green schools, and integrate monitoring capabilities into the stormwater outfall. And that really centers on there's an opportunity here for educational environmental benefit here being on the BHS campus. So that was their recommendation.
Okay. All right. Does the applicant want to address Sharon's commentary?
Sure, I'll start, and if any other team members have anything to add, please do. But we have felt all along that the 362 spaces that we're proposing will be adequate to serve daily demand. And we've talked about these handful of events that do occur throughout the year, where there might be more parking demand than the spaces provided. But, it really is only a handful of events. And we did discuss the possibility of maybe constructing an overflow parking area somewhere on the site that would basically consist of a grassed over reinforced area. And we came to the conclusion that we didn't think that it was really necessary, and that it was worth the expense to construct something like that, and also have to request a waiver to exceed the parking max. And we really just came down to the conclusion that we feel that we can, or the district feels that it can adequately handle those large events through some kind of a parking management plan, or maybe we park people down at the campground or at the beach, or maybe some institutional uses, further down North Avenue or something, and use shuttles to manage it that way. So we're not planning to request a waiver for more parking than what is being proposed or what is allowed.
Okay. Well, if no one else has any questions, I suggest that we close the public hearing and we'll deliberate on this.
Actually, before you close it, can I say one more thing?
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to, we wanted to, call out a couple of the recommended conditions in the staff report, and just ask that you consider revising those. And we've already talked about both of them. The first one was the Conservation Board's recommendation that we include only non-native species. And we agree with and support Scott's recommendation to revise that to basically require the applicant to work with the city arborist to come up with a plan that meets his approval, the park department's approval, and then requires his approval before we start construction. So I just wanted to go on record saying we do support that revision. And then the other one was just in regards to the TDM requirement that we purchase car share memberships. We were going to ask if there's any way you can be flexible and not require that. We would certainly support that, but I understand what Scott is saying, and I'll let you decide if you can do that or not.
Okay, appreciate that. Thanks, Joe. So with that, I'll close the public hearing. Thank you all for your presentation. The last item on our agenda for the evening, which I just lost, is ZP 22-416, 323, 325 College Street. Do I have the applicants for that?
Yeah, you do. I'm still just cleaning up from the last item. AJ, just give me a second.
Yeah.
I didn't even have to throw Brian out. He left. All right. Okay. Bruce, you can talk to us. Dan, I think, is involved. Let me know if anyone else should weigh in.
I think it's just us. This is Bruce.
Good evening, Bruce and
Hello.
Dan. How are you both?
Great. How are you?
Good. So please raise your right hand. Do you swear that testimony you give tonight will be true and correct under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
I do.
Okay, great. So, we have the staff comments, we see the project. I guess I should tell the record that I work down the street, so I'm well aware of the block. Why don't you walk us through your project briefly?
Bruce, you want me to do that?
Yeah, Dan, why don't you go ahead? Sure, your baby.
All right. This is Dan Goldsman, the project architect for this proposal. And what is being considered here is an addition to an addition. So on the site, as can be seen in the elevations and the renderings that we submitted, is the 1832 Chauncey Goodrich Luther Hager House at 325 College, a subsequent addition to the west of that from 2010, 325, 323 College. And what we're discussing tonight is a addition to the north of the 2010 piece along the street front. So 3 pieces, a total of 17 units in a lot, vehicle and bicycle lot. So regarding the design of this proposed addition, it went through multiple rounds at the DRB, generated a robust discussion. And the majority of that was around the relationship between this 4-story piece that we're proposing and the adjacent 1832 historic structure. As a result, the 4th story, the top story of what we're proposing, was set back so that the facade of that 4th story is in line with the historic structure. As well, the piece we're proposing has brick cladding, similar brick, similar color to the historic piece. It has windows with gridded windows with muntins, similar black color to the historic piece. And both the piece we're proposing and the historic building have entry elements along their street side features, along their street side facades. We also wanted to tie the 4-story piece that we're proposing to the existing addition. So they have a similar cornice detail. The detail along the top of the building wraps from the 2010 piece to what we're proposing. The top floor material is white clapboard, similar to the addition that it's being attached to, similar color, similar trim details, the corners around the windows. And the bottom floor of what we're proposing is clad in stone, similar to the previous addition, and also similar to the 1832 piece, which has a stone foundation. So the ultimate goal of what we're doing is to tie this whole assembly together, make them speak to each other, make them speak to the neighborhood, to the context, to the historic district. So that's the quick presentation, and we could certainly address any issues the board has.
Okay. I actually don't have a lot of questions. I'm curious if the board has any, particularly the architecture folks on this one. No, nobody?
It's really about the issue of the original structure and the prominence and whether the new structure encroaches on that. Do you have any thoughts about that, Dan?
I do. Bruce, do you want me to address this or you?
Yeah, I can talk a little about it, and maybe you can too, Dan. You know, we thought hard about the design standards at 6.2.1, you know, to H and then which was, I think, adopted maybe about 7 or 8, maybe 15 years ago or so, but after the historic standards. And it requires that any additions reinforce the existing street edge. So there's substantial sort of pull and tug, as there is in many places in the ordinance between them. I'd also say that if you drive by Cambria and Rise, I think this board has sort of come to grips with those two elements of the ordinance. And the Rise to the south of it is boldly forward at the street, and the connecting orphanage structure, they're connected, and I could share a screen and show you a picture of that. And from one side, you can't really see the orphanage at all, and that's not the case here. You can somewhat see ours, and as you can see from our rendering. Happy to share that picture to show you that, but I think we meet the standards of 5.4.8 and also the 6.2.1, which requires that street edge to be consistent with neighboring properties.
Okay.
I have a question. And I don't know what's going on with the website, Scott, but I'm having a lot of trouble.
Yeah, me too. Time and time again.
Doing some different things on the website right now, so I can't really open the floor plans.
So you're getting the 401 error as well, the 404?
On the agenda and on different ones for this meeting.
Yeah, I've been having a hard time.
Yeah.
So my question is, I'm trying to understand the circulation, the entrance into the units in this building, how one gets into them. And I apologize that may be in the floor plan section, but I can't access right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
To answer your,
Go ahead, Dave.
you want me to take it or you, Bruce?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so as I said, this is attached to the front of the previous edition. And between the previous edition and the new piece is basically a circulation spine. So the main entry is along the driveway to the side, and there's a stairway there, and it accesses each of the 4 apartments, which are located closer to the street front.
Is that the proposed accessible entrance? Is that what you're referring to?
That is correct.
And does that, if you want to get to that from the sidewalk of the street, what do you walk down the driveway?
That is correct.
Always seems disappointing not to have a pedestrian connection to your entrance from the sidewalk. Right.
Well, it's a function of the space that we had.
What is the front, the door that's on the front of the building that looks like a very nice entrance? What does that connect to?
The ground floor apartment.
And that's the main entrance for that one unit.
That is correct.
Thank you.
There is room for a sidewalk from the street along the driveway if needed.
For the lot coverage?
We're not anywhere near lot coverage problems. It's a 3/4 acre.
Yeah.
Site.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Feel free. Anybody in the audience here to speak on this one? Nope. I don't see anybody, Scott, you do?
I don't see anyone.
All right, well, with that, I'll close the public hearing on this one.
Thank you all.
That wraps up our agenda for the evening, and we are adjourned. So, bye Bruce, bye Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.